Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, all of you, welcome to, what, are these the final panels? Is it the last hour of paneling? Next to last hour?
No, next hour is the last one. It's
all
only two
right, the
panels.
next to last are the penultimate panels of New York Comic Con 2014. I have the year right? Yes. It is my great honor to be up here with some of my friends and Skyping in yet another granddaughter of the comic book revolution. I've gotten to know a number of these individuals over the course of time and gotten to know how they're such rich sources of information in ways that some of their parents aren't. So, I am Dr. Travis Langley, the author of a book called Batman and Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night, and that's really all that I matter for this. This is about them and their families and the history that relates to us all. Whether you are a regular comic book reader, an interest in history, or just an interest in truth and people knowing, what really happened ever. I think this is relevant to people in many different ways. I am going to start at this end. I'm going to let each of my panelists, and then we'll head to Skype. So I'll have to let Jacque know when everybody up here has introduced themselves. We'll start at this end. Tell us who you are and what your wonderful grandfather contributed for us all. Yes. Yes. We don't need the visual. They could hear it just fine.
Oh, fine.
Jacque, you still there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here.
The AV guy wanted to know why there was no picture on screen because we.
Oh, okay. Do you want?
No, we're good. Oh, well,
Okay.
yeah, sure. If you want to turn your camera on, but we have to.
Sure.
Yeah, all right.
Can you see me?
Well, I can.
No, not
The
yet.
screen is blinking.
You're coming.
Hold on.
There you
There,
go.
they can see you now. Okay, now they have a face instead of just somebody's voice.
Hey.
Okay, ladies, once again, let's start. Tell us who you are, who your grandfather is, what that person is important for.
I'm Nicky Wheeler-Nicholson, and my grandfather was Major Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson, and he is important because he was the first person to use all original art and scripts for comic books. So he started really the first comic books with original art and scripts. He also hired Siegel and Schuster. He was the first publisher to see the Superman drawings. He hired Bob Kane. He hired Walt Kelly. Basically, a lot of the industry standards in comic books are as a result of my grandfather. He began his career in the pulps writing adventure stories, and that's one of the reasons that the titles of the comic books are called adventure, action, detective comics, because they come right out of the pulp stories. So that's me.
I'm Shelley Mayer. I am the granddaughter of Sheldon Mayer. He did he's probably best known for getting Superman published when he was working for Max Gaines, and everyone else had rejected it, and he brought it home to his little brother, who thought it was awesome and brought it to Max Gaines, and they pushed it through, and now we have Superman. But his influence on the current cartoonists and other cartoonists is generally the scribbly. He did the first autobiographical comic back in the 30s. And one of the first superheroes with Ma Uncle, which I think was the precursor, and then an autobiographical comic about my grandparents, my parents, and went on to do Black Orchid, Doodles Duck, The Three Mouseketeers, and a few other bits.
There's a big ellipsis at the end of there.
Okay, it's my first panel, and I'm a little bit nervous.
They're all nervous. We're all nervous. We're all nervous together.
And I have them on my back, so I
nervous.
don't forget.
Okay. All right. Athena.
Well, my name's Athena Finger, and really without these two lovely ladies' granddads, my grandfather wouldn't have had a job. My grandfather was Bill Finger. He was the uncredited co-creator of Batman and the original writer for the stories.
Yeah. And on screen, Ms. Nodell.
Hi. Okay, my grandfather was Mart Nodell, and he created the Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott. He, after that, worked in the Timely bullpen and drew characters like Captain America, Submariner, Human Torch. And then after that, he went into advertising, and he worked he was an art director for the team that created the Pillsbury Doughboy. So he did the first drawings of the Pillsbury Doughboy as well. And yeah, and he worked with Shelley Mayer's grandfather. That her grandfather was pretty much my grandfather's boss. So,
Yes.
but yeah. So, and in the 80s and 90s, my grandparents went to a ton of conventions, so a lot of people know them from the convention scene.
And your grandfather worked with Athena's grandfather, because your grandfather
Yes.
created the Golden Age Green Lantern,
Yes.
and Bill wrote the first story, so he would
did.
usually be listed as co-creator. Although,
Yes.
you know, if you ever look at the old comics, when Marty Nodell actually did his art, even when he used a pen name, he would be listed first in the credits, which they usually didn't put the artist before the credits, but that was a form of recognizing that he was the one who started the character.
Correct.
And then Bill got credit before the artist, you know, the rest of the time, even when it was Irwin or the others, because Marty was the one, you know, who started it. So, all of you individuals, it's a the reason I got fascinated with this, and Eddie Fingeroth and each of us have talked about this, on how you, in some ways, know more about your grandparents professionally and how the fans see them than sometimes your parents do. So why is it that the parents or the kids of the Golden Age creators don't seem to be quite as interested as a lot of their grandchildren are? Any of you speak up.
To do what they did is you have to be fairly obsessive, and it took an awful lot of time away from everything else. So they're drawing a lot of cute little things aimed towards kids, but they're not spending a whole lot of time with their own, just the nature of it, you know, providing. And it's all adorable to us now, and the colors are great, and it's a lot of fun, but it was a lot of hours and a lot of smoke-filled rooms, and their families were fast asleep. So there's a fair amount of the comics took their parents away from them a little bit.
Well, I think there was more than just that with the situation between my grandfather and my father, considering his sexual orientation. So they kind of...
You move the microphone closer.
Sure, I'm sorry. So I know that Bill and my father butted heads about that when he got older. So there was a separation.
I don't think a lot of them can call what it was. They butted heads over.
But he was gay. My father was gay, and he was not accepted for his sexual orientation. So there was not really a falling out, but they didn't spend as much time together as they did when my dad was younger. So.
And Nicky, we've had long discussions about this.
In my case, it's a little bit different because my grandfather lost the company in 1938, just as Superman came out, and it was a very difficult situation. A lot of people have written about it, but Gerard Jones and I, who wrote Men of Tomorrow, are now working on a biography about my grandfather together. And we've also been working with a wonderful scholar that some of you may know, who's done a number of books on Batman and Siegel and Schuster, named Tom Andre. And we're all out on the West Coast, and what we've been doing is just collaborating with one another and going through all the extant letters and the legal documents around the bankruptcy that my grandfather was forced into. And we've come up with some very interesting things that a lot of people don't know and that will be revealed in the book. So as Tom DeHaven, some of you may know his work, he wrote a book about Superman, and he interviewed me for it. And I told him at the time, it's one thing if your grandfather loses a plumbing business in the Depression, and it's a little bit different if your grandfather loses Superman. So my family, my aunts and uncle, my father, it was a big thing when that happened to my grandfather, and he refused to talk about it at all after that. He would never speak of it again because he was so devastated. It was a real vision that he had for the comics that happened in many good ways, and so it was very, very difficult for him to lose that, and as a result, that generation really didn't know that much. There was just a mythology, and there was also, when those kinds of things happen, like Athena said, and like Chelle has said, there are family issues and, shall I say the word, dysfunction? You know, they're just, when you're from a family of very creative people, I think that has a lot to do with that next generation, and maybe we're all okay.
Oh, well. I have layers to
We'll
it.
go with okay. I just want to say, I never met my grandfather, so I've always been kind of intrigued about who he was, but since my father passed away when I was in my early teens, I had no one else to really go to, so I've been exploring mainly this year since I've been coming to the conventions and meeting people at Nodell. I find it fascinating because you asked the question of why we're more interested. Well, my curiosity is because I don't have anyone to really go to at the time I didn't to find stuff out. So I was curious.
Yes, Bill died before you were even born.
Right.
And your father passed when you were relatively young.
Yes.
And I'll come back to that because I want to give Jacque a turn on this. What about you and your family? Who are the Nodell experts?
Well, my dad, Spencer, he was quite close with my grandparents. Marty is his father, and he actually took him and helped, because when my grandparents started going to conventions, they were already like in their 70s. So my dad went to the conventions with them, and then all of us kids came. And there's actually quite a few kids in my family, and we would all go to the conventions all together, and it was pretty much where we would see our grandparents. I'd only been to my grandparents' house once, ever, when I was a kid, because we would just see them at comic book conventions, pretty much. So my dad was very close with them, and so my dad actually is a great resource for a lot of stories. He's just not super into it like I am as far as writing about it. But I do plan, actually, hopefully over the holidays, I'm going to interview my dad and get some of these stories, because he actually, every time I'm on the phone with him, he starts telling me something. Like, he started telling me a story of how my grandfather and Athena's grandfather, Bill Finger, he one day took my grandfather over to Bob Kane's house, and he started telling me that, and then I think he got distracted or something, so I need to find out the rest of that story.
And you've got Athena over here wondering, well, what was the rest of that story?
Yeah, I'll find out.
All right, please let me know.
Well, for my mom and her brother were the subject of Sugar and Spike. So they grew up in the comic book that they didn't get to see. It was a strange layer of their life. So they didn't get to see him very much, but all the stories and all the bits that they did share was in a comic book. So it created a little bit of resentment, I think.
So you're the child of a comic book character.
This is what happens to you when you're raised by a cartoon. So my mom was Sugar of Sugar and Spike.
So, Jacque was talking about things she wants to find out. I know Athena has been searching for things to find out. What are some of the mysteries about your grandfathers? You would love to know more about them and this industry, or just the work that they did, or their lives. Any of you. Yeah.
It's tough because he was such a recluse, from what I've heard. I'd like to know more about him as a person. I mean, I hear a lot about him as a writer and him working in the industry and how he got screwed and this and that. I'd like to hear more about him as a person. When I met Lynn, that was great because that was more on a family side.
Yeah. And who's Lynn?
Lynn was his second wife after my grandmother. And they had a wonderful life. She had children from another marriage, and he basically raised her children and had a family unit there. And so I enjoyed hearing more of that side, and I'd like to find out more, but it's hard. It really is.
Of course, in his case, he died a few weeks short of age 60. He would have been 100 this year, so he's been gone a long time.
Yes, he has.
So he was a recluse, or at least relatively.
Well, because he was writing all the time.
And he procrastinated, ran late on his things too. But he's been gone for 40 years, so the people who worked with him at the beginning, there's a small number of them.
Yes. So it's been tough, but you've been helping me.
The rest of you, even those you knew the grandparents, you still have things you'd wonder. What are some of the mysteries you'd like to find out about them?
Well, I'm with Athena. I didn't know my grandfather either. My parents divorced when I was just a baby, and I really didn't know my dad until I was 30, and by then my grandfather had passed away. But I did know my aunts and my uncle and my dad, of course, and because I came into the family as an adult, they treated me differently than the rest of my cousins. At one point, there were 21 of us first cousins, and out of all that generation, I'm the only one who's really pursued this story of my grandfather's. And I think like Athena, not having grown up with my grandfather, but having heard the stories from my mom, who lived in the house with my grandparents when she was working for the United Nations on Long Island, I was very intrigued by my grandfather, and I always knew that he had something to do with Superman, but I didn't really know what it was. So I think it's just been, my grandfather's story was really pushed aside and forgotten. And I just feel like he's such an amazing person, and he led such an incredible, adventurous life and did so many amazing things, and I just want people to know what he did.
For me, I lived with my grandfather until I was 5. And drew. I was the subject of a couple of his comics and drew on everything. Everything for me had to be purple. So, and my mom got married, and I was in military school for 9 years, and I just, as you can imagine, wasn't a good fit. I was drawing cartoons on all my notes and my clothes, my uniforms, and making them more interesting. So, at 17, I got sent to my grandfather's studio to work for him as a colorist. And by then, he had gone far away from the editing game, and he was up in the woods in Copiague, which is, I don't know, about 120, 150 miles north of here. Yeah, it's north. And I thought he was just some old guy that drew pictures. I really didn't get it. He was really comfortable in the fact that he just wanted to draw. Nobody really realized what he had a hand in or what he had accomplished. Walked around with a little Stetson, spent a lot of time at the Copiague pharmacy with his friend Rusty, and made me draw the floor every day, which irritated me. Every day after school, I
made you draw the floor?
Every day for perspective. I had to sit in the living room and draw where the tile met the kitchen tile, from a floor level, from a chair level, from a stool level, every day, which I'm grateful for now. My drawings are better for it. And when he passed, people from DC Comics showed up at the funeral, and I started asking more and more questions and realized all the things that I got that he was in comics, but I had no idea how much he had done, and all the things that I gravitated towards normally as a kid that my mom didn't want us to read were actually things that he had done. So it became an obsession. So I'm the search for me, because I'm an artist and because all my family kept saying, "You're so much like your grandfather," good and bad, became a little bit about self-discovery. and how the idiosyncrasies layer in with the art and how that works. So for me, it's been a little bit of a personal journey because of a lot of the other stuff I had known.
Jacque?
I think for me, since I knew my grandfather quite well, you know, in his later life, I think I'd like to know a little bit about what drove him to become an artist. He had actually tried to become an actor first and didn't work out, so he decided, well, I'm just going to draw. So I'd like to know a little bit more about his early life, and then also about his time in the Timely bullpen, because I know quite a bit about the Green Lantern thing. So I'd like to know a little bit after that. And I'm also curious to learn more about my grandmother's involvement during the Green Lantern period, because I've heard stories that she would letter things, and I don't know if that's true or if she was maybe remembering how she was remembering things, but I also know that she would take his pages up to the DC offices and deliver them. So I'd like to know more about that, and about they were Marty and Carrie. A lot of people who attended conventions, they know them as sort of a pair, and they were very much in love, you know, up until they both passed away. And I think I'd like to know a little more about, since I study romance comics, I guess I'd like to know more about their romance.
And that leads me to the next question. You've each touched on creativity throughout the family. What kinds of creativity have shown up in these families that have descended from these, you know, creators in the Golden Age? How are you artistic or otherwise creative, or is that up to other members of the family? Anybody?
Well, my grandfather started out as a writer for pulp fiction. He wrote adventure stories from at least 1924 to 1956, and these were stories that were based on his own adventures in the military. He was on the Mexican border fighting Pancho Villa. He was in the Philippines fighting the Muslim Moros. He was in Siberia during the Bolshevik Revolution, and he had a really amazing, adventurous life, and a lot of people didn't believe it. They thought, this guy is making this stuff up. And that was one of the things that I was really interested in, making sure that these were true stories. And when I started doing my research through the military archives and declassified files at the National Archives, and if you don't think that is boring and hard, I've spent years going through these things, and it was just amazing. I found out more than I could have ever imagined. And I am a writer. My grandfather was a writer, and I think that's really the real passion for me. And I think it skipped pretty much the second generation. There was creativity, but not to the extent that as my grandfather.
Right. And in your generation, you've got people who've gone into things like acting, right?
Yeah, I have a cousin whom everybody knows, I think. People always come up to me and say, oh, are you Dana Wheeler-Nicholson's sister, cousin? And I always say, yes I am. And so a lot of people know Dana from film and television. She's very beautiful. And
So are you.
Some of my other cousins work as editors, which my grandfather was a wonderful editor and a publisher. So there are a lot of people in my generation that are in editing, publishing, writing. It's, you know, it's there in the gene pool, I guess.
I think for me it's really similar in that it seemed to have skipped. I mean, they have like a sense of it, but they went so far away. One's a minister and the other one's in nursing. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. For me, I'm a lot like him in that I hit a lot of mediums, and the visual mediums seem to come fairly natural to me. I really enjoy creating the world that's in my head out more than things, reacting to the one that's here most of the time. He carved and could play any instrument he picked up, and wrote and drew. And I do a lot of that. I weld instead of play music, but I think there's an incredible amount of similarities. Where the journey of trying to understand it more came in was in the morning time. He would have to have his drawing, and he would draw in the bathroom and come out, and you could not interact with him, and it would be like, you messed with my rhythm. And I thought it was like the most neurotic way to behave, and I turned straight into him. So yeah, I think I'm an artist before I'm Shelley.
That's a good way of putting it. I don't know. My dad was an artist, but his medium was food.
Medium was food?
Yes, he was a chef here in New York City. Self-taught. He learned how to cook through reading and experimenting. And he became an artist with food. Before that, he did painting, so he had his creative side that I believe Portia really did support until he came out. But you know, it was the time. I myself I've done some art. I'm a mathematician. That's not very exciting, but
Yes, it is. We're working on a math comic.
yes, we are. We gotta blend the two somehow. We use the same side of the brain at least. So I don't know. I don't think it skipped a generation in our family. I really don't.
What are you, Jackie? You and your family. Oh.
Yeah, well, I think my dad is very creative. Both my parents were, and I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers, and I think we're all creative in our own way. And most of my sisters and I, we all are very crafty. We sew and knit and embroider. I think we get that from our mom. But my one brother, Bennett, he's an amazing musician and a visual artist. He should probably do comics, but he really doesn't have an interest. He's currently a luthier, so he makes violins. But I guess I was always most similar to my grandpa in an artistic way. I can't do I can't draw at all. Pretty terrible there. But I always danced, and I used to sing, and I did theater, and now I'm pretty much sticking to history. But I was always like my grandpa, and I think that was Shelley who said she was a lot like her grandfather. My family, when I was little, they always called me Mini Mart. That was my nickname. So I guess I've got a lot of the artistic, like him.
Or you remind them of the local store.
I guess so.
Okay, so in some cases, the creativity skips a generation, or the interest in those grandfathers' work did, and sometimes we've been speculating, is some of that because their work was so consuming that it took them away from the kids, and that's part of what got some of the kids less interested? How do you feel about that, any of you?
Well, just to chime in, my father would read Bill's stories before they were submitted and give him advice on storylines. So he was right there on the floor with Bill creating the stories. So there was an interest there. And I know once Bill passed away, my father really tried to get the recognition for his dad. And he was heartbroken that he didn't get the recognition.
Well, I think in my case it was kind of schizophrenic in the sense that my aunts and my uncle and my dad were just so excited when I started doing the research that I did. They were really thrilled about it and really encouraging of me and wanting it to happen. But there was also this sense of that somehow my grandfather had failed at something because he lost DC and lost the character Superman. So there was a double-edged sword there, and there still kind of is in my family, because there's a sense of that loss, and at the same time being really proud of what he did to basically start the industry. So it's kind of a funny thing there, and I've had to navigate within my own family, but also in the industry, because there's such strong stories that have been handed down, and people sometimes don't want to hear that there might possibly be some other aspects to things than what we've heard all along. So it's been an interesting path.
I'm with you on that, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a funny layer to that for me, because you know families are. You're kind of mean to each other, but no one else can say anything. And my grandfather's little brother, who, if any of you follow Scribbly, was Dinky in the comic, was pretty bitter about it too. They all were. And I was trying really hard to do research and asking them the aspects that I didn't know, and none of them were forthcoming. And inadvertently, I asked my uncle a question that came out kind of negative, and I, the same day, had posted a record of Spider-Man that I'd gotten for 10 cents because I'm into albums. And I get this email that says, Spider-Man was a rival of Superman, and I myself have never purchased one. And that was it. Just got totally defensive. And in getting defensive, all this information about how it came about started pouring through. So it was really cool. And it seemed to have broken through the resentments. At this point, it's starting to see the gifts that came from it. Because the way you view something at 5 and the way you can then view it at 60, fortunately, it seems to be giving them a new perspective. But at the time, I think they were pretty pissed. They felt like DC Comics was probably the other woman.
Jackie, anything on that?
I don't know. Like I said, my dad was pretty close to my grandparents, and I think very protective. Now, I think his brother, my uncle, has a different view. I think, it does seem like my grandparents were, completely, in the comic book thing when my dad and his brother were small. And so, it does seem like, comics took up their whole, everything. But I don't know. I don't think there was really any tension there as far as anything like that goes.
Now, do any of you run into people who assume you must be billionaires for being
Please.
Yeah. Well, you must be loaded. Well,
Yeah, and somebody asked me that yesterday. I took the subway, which I've been taking every day, thank you very much, and somehow they started the conversation.
Do you have a driver?
Yeah, somehow the conversation came up, what are you doing in New York? I'm at the New York Comic Con, and I don't quite look like I might be at New Comic Con, because I like to come disguised as mild-mannered me. Right. And so we were talking, and then the inevitable thing came up. Oh, wow, you must be loaded. I said, what the hell do you think I'm doing on the subway?
Research.
Right.
Yeah. Because you have varying degrees. Well, in Athena's case, her grandfather was the ghost writer for the guy whose name went on everything. During his lifetime, he never saw his name on a single Batman publication.
No, he did.
One TV episode, or one 2-part TV episode.
Right. Charles was nice enough to put his name first.
Yeah, he had a writing partner in TV at that point, because Bob had gotten mad and gotten him kicked off the Batman comics book that he'd worked on for 26 years. But on this 2-part TV episode, the only story that was written by comic book writers, he and his writing partner wrote that, and Sinclair usually went first. And Bill, who wasn't quick to stick up for himself even on little things, but Charles could pick up that something was bothering him. It's like, what is it? Just say it. And Bill said, well, I would really like to have my name go first, or just really show those DC people. And so he's on the Clock King episodes, and it says, does that one says Bill, or does that one say William? It's a cartoon episode of
It was
Super.
I believe it was the cartoon that said
The
William.
Superman, the Superboy cartoon says William.
Right, which is
Colonel
not
Lincoln.
correct.
Yeah, it's he was Bill Finger. It was actually Milton. Was his
Right.
birth name. Before I go to audience questions, because I don't completely
Hold
trust
on.
Okay.
Can I have one thing really quick?
Okay, you go.
And that
You do one of your
My
things.
grandfather was one of the first ones to get the artists to start signing their work
Mhm.
because prior to that they didn't. And he had made it so far in editorship that when he was drawing, he was just putting his name on he kind of started a thing where artists finally started signing their own work, which was great.
Now, before I go to audience questions, I don't 100% trust the Wi-Fi, so I've been worried this entire time. What if we suddenly lose Jacque? So before I go to them, all of you tell everybody where they can find you online. If you tweet or Facebook or Tumblr or whatever. Let's start with Jacque, since that's the one I'm most worried about, and then we'll head to my left.
Okay, so I write about 1960s and 70s romance comic books. My blog is Sequential Crush, which is just www.sequentialcrush.com, or you can just go to JacqueNodell.com and it'll redirect you. And there's also a Sequential Crush Facebook page, and I tweet, I do Instagram, I pretty much do the whole gamut. But the best place to check me out is sequentialcrush.com.
Nicky?
I have a blog at www.majormalcolmwheeler-nicholson.com, and we just came out with a book of his adventure stories called The Texas Siberia Trail by Off Trail Publications, and you can get it on Amazon. And I tweet, and I don't know what all I do. It's so amazing. And there's a Facebook fan page for him, so if you're interested, please go on and join that page. And Gerard Jones, who wrote Men of Tomorrow, and I are working on a biography about my grandfathers.
That's the one you got the Eisner for, isn't it?
What?
Gerard Jones, he got an Eisner.
Yeah. For Men of Tomorrow. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Chelle?
I have a website, www.peacefulshades.com. It's under construction at the moment. And I have an Instagram under Peaceful Shades and Facebook art page under Shades of Peace. I'm also working on a biography of his comic, and I have 2 stories that he drew for me as a little girl that I'm currently coloring, and they will be up on the website soon.
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Just put in Athena Finger and I'll come up. You can check out the Bill Finger Appreciation page on Facebook also. So check them out.
And if you're looking for Shelley, it's Chelle, because I'm weird.
Short for Michelle with 2 L.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Questions, comments, insults, bribes. Green hand.
Not so much a question, I just want to thank all your families for creating all the characters and the trends in the comic industry that they did. Just
He's
very
thinking
big
things. All right. Prison shirt.
Yes. I'm wondering, since all these characters have changed so much over the years, what is your least favorite change that has occurred that you know of in the comic that your grandfathers worked on, or what is your favorite change that occurred? And
Okay. Jacque, what's your favorite or least favorite changes that you've seen to your grandfather's creations?
Well, I guess the nature of the Green Lantern is that there's a bunch of them. So I would love to see an Alan Scott movie, like a period piece. I think that would be really awesome. But
I saw a fist pump at that out in the audience.
I have to admit, I don't really read that many new comics because I'm kind of stuck in the 60s and 70s. You know, I think a lot of the movie, you know, it was fun. I think it was definitely like a kid's movie. But like I said, I would like to see an Alan Scott movie.
Okay.
One of the best aspects of it is that it's now a thing to be proud of, to say you're a comic artist, whereas in the 30s and 40s, they were put down. They put a lot of hours in, and they did a lot to build this foundation, and it was not a credible profession. You're really, it was not accepted at all. And so I like how much credibility comics have now become as art and writing and an art form in and of itself. For me, the worst is the way color is approached. I really liked it before digital. The not having a limited palette makes the page way too loud and too much going on, and I think it takes away from the line work and the writing a little bit for me.
I don't really read comics.
Because it was your family's dark secret
Yeah,
when
it
you were
was like
growing
the
up.
family dirty secret. We didn't talk about it. We didn't approach anything that had anything to do with comics, except for maybe the movies.
Then who's your favorite or least favorite Batman?
My least favorite Batman as the character in a movie or as the actor?
Whichever you feel like it.
Yes.
I would have to say the Batman and Robin movie was really bad.
As I call it, the abomination.
But, you know, they all can't be winners, as we know. But, you know, I've enjoyed watching the progression of the character on film, on TV, in animation, in the movies. It's been really interesting because my first experiences were Super Friends cartoon Saturday mornings and the reruns of the 60s Batman show. I mean, that's what I grew up with because we didn't have comics in the house. In fact, I don't think my mom would have liked if I brought comics into the house. So
I used to tape them under my drawer, like in a manila envelope, and I would hide them under my clothing drawer so she couldn't find them and read them with a flashlight under the blanket.
yeah, no, that was not happening. The true origins of Batman. So I'd like to see the different ideas behind the Batman character.
Well, I can't really speak to an individual character as well as...
Your grandfather created the industry.
So I'd like to speak to that. One of the reasons I really love doing this is because I really love the art and the writing when it's really good. And so I'm interested in the historical aspects of it, some of the amazing things in the past, like Siegel and Schuster created a character called Dr. Occult, which I absolutely love, and most of you have probably not seen because those comics aren't available. But I also love some of the work that some of the new, younger artists are doing, and I agree with Chelle's the way she expressed it about the way things look from the digital point. And I just love the artwork, and I love the work that people are doing now. There's some great stuff out there.
All right. I got the 5-minute warning 1 minute ago, so. Okay, Supergirl.
Hello. I was just wondering,
There's two Supergirls.
Oh. One Supergirl says. I didn't see. Okay, purple Supergirl, go ahead.
what is your favorite medium for seeing your grandfather's characters portrayed, like TV show, animation, movie?
Okay, so what's your favorite medium for comic book stories?
Comic book.
Okay. Okay, for Sheldon's comic books.
Comics.
Okay. Jackie's comics.
I actually, now that I've been to quite a few cons and finding out more about my grandfather, I have been reading more. I really love Alex Ross's work. Like, it's so beautiful and blows me away. It really does. One of my first comics that I read was Kingdom Come. My friend put it in my hands. You have to read this. I'm like, okay. And I was just, I mean, the artwork is phenomenal. It blows me away.
Nicky.
Well, I have to confess, I love anything that's creative practically. So I love the comics, but I also like books about the comics. I also love movies. I love the animation. I just love the whole creative process.
Yeah.
Okay, other Supergirl.
Okay, I'm not Supergirl, but I was.
Well,
Oh, okay.
oh, she's just stealing questions.
Yes, I am. Thank you so
All right,
much. Yes. I was wondering, like, I know that the industry has changed a lot over the many decades, and recently, where I went to this panel about, granddaughters of the people who really had a huge impact on comics, and I know that Shelley was talking about how she was a colorist, and how do you think it's changed for women, like, now in the comic book industry, and, like, what have you seen from your inside perspective? Recently we had the whole, Spider-Woman cover scandal, but we've also seen, like, more positive changes, like, with Batgirl's new outfit and, Thor changing into not even Lady Thor, just a new Thor happens to be a woman. It's just, how do you think it's changed? How do you think that this has been influenced? Where do you think it comes from?
I think that's a bigger question than the minute we've got left.
I think that's a panel right there.
Yeah, a good one.
And yeah, a very good one.
So I hate to sidestep. Does anybody have something they could answer in about 1 minute?
Well, why don't
No, they want to
at
try
least
it.
touch on that. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right.
I think
They'll
that
chase us out or not.
I think that
Or we'll use Jackie on the
across all medium, they're starting to show more strong women figures. Since women are becoming more here, more involved in comic book world and animation and writing and promoting themselves. So I think that this new genre of women characters that are coming out is a reflection of the society saying, women are important and we're strong and we're powerful, just as strong and powerful as those men out there too. So I really see this stronger feminine side coming out.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also, because of what I experienced, is that the industry is basically run by men, which in itself is not a bad thing. Most of the men that I work with I absolutely love and adore, and they've been fantastic to me, but there are some men who are running the industry who are not making the best decisions. So you got to keep doing what you're doing because you look fantastic.
Jackie, anything real quick on that? You gave me the 1 minute warning 30 seconds ago.
Okay, well, I didn't fully hear the question. But
Okay, what do you think about how the comics industry has changed with regard to women?
Well, I mean,
In 10 seconds.
okay, I study romance comics, so I'm going to say there was always, women. We just haven't uncovered the full depth of what they were doing in the industry. There were women artists and writers, although it was primarily men. But, if you want to see a historical representation of women in comics, romance comics are a great place to look.
All right.
And I think the more we have women writers, the more that the focus is going to shift.
Yep.
Okay. Let's have our panelists. A round of applause for them all. And then
She did a great job for her first panel.
Yeah.
I think she needs another round of applause.
Because I brought them with me.
All right, the three of you are
Chelle?
here. Yeah, oh yeah, her grandfather's on her back, even in life, even in afterlife. All right. If you all step toward the screen so people can take pictures of you and Jackie all at the same time, sort of, kind of. We give room for the next panel to head in and take our space. Thank you. I have no
There
idea.
is no
He's chasing
panel
us
after
out.
this.
Oh, well then who cares if we leave or not?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Hi, Jackie.
Give us the... Oh, they're saying hi to you over there at the screen. All right, let's get
Thank
pictures
you.
of three of them and the screen now. All right, they're taking pictures. Smile.
Okay.
All right, I want another picture with these granddaughters. Let me get over here.
I was just gonna say, Travis.
Let me get over here with these ladies. All right.
All right.
Okay, all right, we're good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.